Hello, hello, hello. Today is the first episode of DDK Esports ever that will be covering the major or doing really any preview work. Of course, I did some interviews before at the last major, but I'm talking preview episodes. That was something I was not able to do effectively last time. And we're going to start off by doing our Pick'Ems. And again, it's something that I don't normally ever do. So this is going to be very interesting, as a few of the teams will be difficult for me to really place just due to the fact that I have not seen a huge amount from them. And when it comes to the best of threes, when we're talking the elimination and advancement matches, that's where things get interesting because, a lot of teams can be particularly special on one particular map or in one particular matchup. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But I think the first 6 teams for me are pretty locked in, and we'll talk about those teams. Fnatic, of course, have been much more consistent, generally speaking. They, much like NiP now, are packed full of skill. The lineup is pretty... It actually has a lot of strength, I would say, and what is the word I'm looking for? They're very resilient. And they're a team that don't necessarily have that tactical, strategical depth to consistently make those top 3, top 4s at the international events of this caliber, but they are a team that does have the ability, with the skill on hand and the experience on hand, to make those top 8s pretty regularly and not to lose against teams that are weaker than them. They have a style of play where you will expect to see generally more defensive CT sides. Something that I think that they have been trying to work in on some maps in particular is ways to be a bit more aggressive on their CT sides and take more initiative. But this, honestly, for me, in being a Counter-Strike fan, someone that's watched CSGO for a long time, I would typically see Swedish teams have a slightly different meta when it comes to the rest of the world generally. And I think this is most noticeable on maps like Inferno, where you'll see them be more reluctant most of the time to be as aggressive on Banana as you would see more or less every other team from all the other major regions. And this actually goes for NiP too, to some extent. So this passive playstyle comes at its risks. It has gambles, but the thing is that they're very good at playing that style. So it's something to look out for when you watch them play, how well they play these nail-biting scenarios, that it can make for very exciting matches. So Fnatic, I think, will have no problem going through. I think similarly, NiP, I think I'm going to lump them together here. I think we're going to see the return of Swedish Counter-Strike at this major. I would not be surprised at all if they make the playoffs. It will be a hard run, but from what we've seen so far in the lead up to this major, if we look at sort of the recovery process for both of these teams from the previous major, we should absolutely expect both of these teams to make the Legends stage, I would say. Cloud9, another really easy pick for the top 8 here in the new Challengers stage. This is a pretty damn stacked new Challengers stage, honestly. It's quite difficult to comprehend that things just went this way, but they did. Cloud9, I've spoken a lot about them. They're one of my teams to watch, the absolute team to watch for me right now, because they've got this amazing mixture of players with a huge amount of major experience. We've got a lot of major trophies on everyone except Zelsis. And all of these players as well have come from the same situation where they've all been trying to find that success that they've had previously, but been unable to do so because they couldn't find lineups that worked within their own countries. Let's say, if we're looking at the likes of Flusher, obviously not Golden anymore as he's no longer in the lineup, but of course you've got Flusher in there who was bouncing around in these Swedish teams after being so dominant and for so long being a player that was right at the top of the game, like a guy that was always in the conversation for one of the best players in the world, or effectively a top 3 player at the very least. Of course, you've got Kiyoshima, who similarly was without a team for a very long time and is equally as skilled in many regards. Like a very, very good player, very rock solid, great at pretty much everything you could ask him to do, and he's very smart as well. And when it comes to the clutches, because of how composed he is, he's just very good at just making that decision and just committing to it. So he's a great bomb side anchor. He's very good on those T sides in the mid to late rounds, in those post plants where he's going to be up against those CTs going for the retake. He's very good at all those spots. So we have seen him statistically be very good for the team, and he didn't want to play in a French team for the longest time. Of all the drama that we've seen, all these French super teams that we've seen. There's so much skill in the scene, but obviously there's been issues. There's been issues either whether it be with the culture, with relationships, whatever it might be. There has clearly been issues, and it seemed to be the case that he didn't want any part of that, and he was biding his time, waiting for a good opportunity, and then boom, onto Cloud9 he goes, able to jump in there for I think Kyoshima was the addition for Golden, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's correct, and I think I think that's correct. And then of course you've got Zelsis, jumping in there as well. Or actually, no, okay, so it would be Zelsis for Golden, and then Kyoshima would have come in for the likes of Stika, who was on loan before. I believe that's actually correct. So that moves me nicely to talk about Zelsis very quickly. Zelsis, a very new player. One of the things people have been saying about him is how, despite the fact that he's only got like the stage experience of this year, the IBA Powers Masters, and also the E-League Invitational, it's very little experience now going onto the major stage. Despite that, they've been crediting him, the teammates that is, have been crediting him to be very humble, able to take on any criticism. He's obviously got an incredible wealth of experience behind him. 4 players that he can look to who have seen it all and done it all. So that's like the right formula. If you're going to have if you want a perfect situation, you don't want to have 2 new players that are fresh, right? You want to have that one guy that slots in there, that's the right guy that can look around him and see only confidence because he has all these experienced players around him. And from what we've seen so far, chemistry and personality, it's all been looking very good on the team. They seem to get along very well. They seem to respect each other. And so far, it seems like Zelsis has been doing very well in his roles. You can see the nerves, and that has to be the case. Like, it's very rare, very special that you see a player sit down at his first tournaments and look like he does, in 5 years' time. I've seen that very rarely. It requires a very, very special individual indeed. Not to say that he's not special in any sense. Again, like some of the positions he's been put on, you'll see him lurking on T sides. You'll see him anchoring bomb sites on CT sides. Like, he's been given a lot of very important responsibilities, whether it comes from making calls when it comes to information, in lurking, for example, or whether it comes to him having to anchor bomb sites and understanding how to reposition, how to communicate to his teammates. Like, he's doing good stuff so far, and we have only a reason to think that it will get better for him and his team in the future with him on it. Russian Automatic, obviously, 2 rock solid players again. Automatic, picking up that AWP. I know I'm talking about Cloud9 a lot here, but I do think they're very exciting. they're quite okay. So Automatic and Rush, we know that they're great. Automatic looks like a fantastic aggressive warpath. He's not just like a Nitro. And not to say Nitro's not an amazing AWP player, but Automatic has that quality where it looks like if he wanted to just go full Kenny S, he could. It looks like he's able to go to that extra gear and be very aggressive and do it in a very seamless way. And it's not really out of his comfort zone to do so. That's a really positive sign for someone that has had to take the AWP from Skadoodle. Typically in a team, it's not going to work like that. And of course, with Automatic and Rush, they've been struggling for a year with this lineup to try to find success. So they're very, very hungry. So I didn't mean to make this a Cloud9 podcast, but they are really one of my most exciting teams to watch. And I know, especially after the E-League Invitational, I think we're going to see some really fun games from them. So moving on to the next team, we will have, and so as far as my 3-0 teams go, by the way, because we're talking about Pick'Ems here as well, and I'm trying to help you guys decide with Pick'Ems. I do think that Cloud9, because of the hunger factor, that's very important. The hunger factor is important. A lot of teams that are very good, let's say Fnatic, NiP, even NRG at this point, because of their experience and so on and so forth, these teams are very good. They know they're better than the majority of the competition that they're up against. They know they're going to go through. Like, it's not really a question at this point. And they have so much experience, and they're thinking almost about the playoffs already in some senses. Obviously, if you ask them, of course, that's not going to be the case. But in the back of their minds, they are thinking about that. That's how their prediction, their estimate for the skill that they have, that's where it places them. It places them in the major playoffs, in the top 8 of the major, these teams. And a lot of them have a lot of experience as well. And so what tends to happen, and it's there's 2 things that happen psychologically here, is that you get the best teams in the world who don't want to peak at the beginning of a tournament. They want to just start off pretty steady, doing the basics very well, using their skill, not having to show any fancy strats, and they want to just not glide through as if they're putting in no effort, but they want to just not start off the tournament at 100%. You want to peak at the right time in a tournament. Now, sometimes that can be a bit different when we're talking about tournaments that go over the series of weeks, but at the same time, there is a less of a hunger element to prove themselves than there is for some other teams. And I think Cloud9 is a good example of this, a team that is incredible and should be in the top 8, but they've been denied for so long. This is their opportunity. This is their one shot type thing. If someone wants to start playing or to queue up Eminem, so I think Cloud9 are going to be a 3-0 team. I think another team that really has a lot to prove that should be crushing people is NRG. But I do think that the style of play from Fnatic and NiP makes them very difficult and very resilient at this point. So for me, it is a toss-up between those teams. And so if I had to choose one, and if I was to go with a similar trend here of thinking about the levels of hunger for a team and so on, I would actually choose NRG. I would go out on a limb to choose NRG, mostly because NRG are in an interesting position whereby, again, a team that's very good, they have their issues, and we've spoken about that before, the issues in communication. If you missed that, you can go back to my podcast with Daps, taken from last year, at the end of last year, where he spoke and said, basically our main problem is the communication. And one of the things we thought about that was maybe it's just the combination of players, whilst they have good chemistry together, they enjoy each other and everything like that. It may be that the personalities don't make up for the best Counter-Strike team per se. But that's obviously, we'll see this major will really prove that or not for them. But at the same time, they're very hungry and they're very skilled players with a solid game plan. So I would imagine that they would also go 3-0 because every single game is going to be incredibly critical for them in their minds, so that they're going to have that hyper focus. So my 3-0s will be Cloud9 and NRG. Fnatic and NiP will go through as well. ENCE obviously have been playing really well recently. ENCE is a team that's more difficult for me to predict just because I haven't seen as many of their games, but they have been consistently performing as time has gone by. They've been consistent as making their steady improvements, and honestly just for the easy for ENCE factor, the amazing fan base that we're seeing and sort of the memes and everything that's coming out of ENCE, I just really want them to go through. And it's also so awesome to see Alu just being so satisfied in going back to a team like this and working at it for so long to get some really good achievements moving forwards. And so to see ENCE having so much success recently is really awesome. And their world ranking is 12 for a reason. So I feel like it's very difficult not to throw ENCE in there. So definitely been very impressed by ENCE. Renegades, another team that I think that should go through, and that should be in the Pick'Ems for going through. Renegades seem to have found a lot of firepower on this new team that was very unexpected, and it actually looks like a unit that kind of works. Now they do have a consistency issue, but they are number 13 behind behind ENCE at the moment. The rankings don't mean everything, as we have seen. North, for example, and the troubles that they have found being able to qualify and being able to beat opponents that they should on paper just beat. And that's a more complex question. But Renegades, definitely, they're going to show us a lot of really exciting games, and they're absolutely going to make it through this stage. Vitality, they're another interesting one because for me, Vitality is a team that when it was put together, I just looked at it and I'm like, I don't see how this will work. I don't think this team makes sense. I do like the pickup of Alex for Happy, although I think Happy is a great player and he could do very well on a different team. I also like another player that I could see being replaced on the team is either RPK or potentially Apex to make this team sort of really click. But we'll see, how things develop with Alex. Alex is a really, really good up-and-coming player. I was kind of sad to see that LDLC lineup with him recently sort of disbands to, and those players go their separate ways. But Alex is really incredible. So I just on a pure firepower factor, with Zywo in there, with Alex and Apex and MBK in there, RPK just running at people. I think that should just be enough to see them through. I do think they will drop maps. They're definitely not going in the 3-0 category, but Vitality will definitely get through. G2 is like a really weird one for me. I honestly don't know where to place them, and for me, I want to I want to say that they should go through, but let me just double check all the teams that we have here. So we've got Fnatic, we've got NRG, we've got Cloud9, we've got NiP, we've got ENCE, we've got Team Vitality, we've got G2. Oh, sorry, I didn't put G2 in there. We've got Renegades. So that's 7. Okay, so that means there is just one left. So do I throw G2 in there? This is something I've been struggling with because there's a lot of other teams that could really make an upset. And at most majors recently, we have seen it be the case that one of these lesser known teams or one of these teams from like let's say Asia, like Tyloo, make it to the major. So it's a really difficult one because Tyloo, for example, is a team that I do want to say actually more so than G2, and it's mostly because stylistically they have this like they have a really weird play style where they just do ridiculous stuff, and for the lesser experienced teams it can throw you very, very badly. It's like that extreme case of when you get fragged in a pug or in a match even, and we've all had this feeling where you're thinking to yourself, that guy made a bad play and I got completely wrecked. Like that's just like you get infuriated by it because you just don't expect it because it's such a terrible play, and in your mind that you're just like obsessing over that, and it kind of like tilts you. And that's kind of what Tyloo tend to do to people. So especially the less experienced ones. The other issue is as well is that we got Vega Squadron who honestly like Vega Squadron tend to deliver when it comes to majors, right? And Team Spirit, also a team that has shown some good results, and it's difficult, but it's difficult overall to place them. Furia, again, one of the best teams from Brazil, also difficult to place them, especially in this kind of a setting. Greyhound Gaming, with Dick Stacey and so on. This is also a difficult team to place in this competition. There's just so little data. I don't expect Winstrike to make it through. Vici are a team which I could expect to do some damage as well, much like Tyloo. I think I'm going to have to go for one of the Asian teams here, and I think I will just go with Tyloo just because despite the communication issues that they have, and despite the fact that both Summer and Attack are sort of on loan and the situation's a bit weird and Captain Mo's not going to be there and everything like that, and I just have to pick them. I just have to pick that Tyloo factor. So there are my 8 for the Pick'Ems. This is my Pick'Ems preview podcast. I hope you guys enjoy this one. I hope that in some way it helps to inform you as to how to maybe choose your Pick'Ems as well, some of the safer picks and some of the more risky picks. I do think that amongst some of the teams that I didn't choose, that there is a pretty strong possibility that a couple of those will sneak through, just because of the nature of this kind of... Because we're working with the Swiss system here, which means that if you're unfamiliar with these formats, a Swiss system means that if you win your first game, then you play the other team, like you get matched with another team that won their first game. And then if you lose, if you've gone 1-1, then you're matched up with other teams that go 1-1. So this sometimes can create, like because in the best of one phase, this can sometimes, you can have like an upset where like a highly seeded team or a team that should be a high seed suddenly goes 1-1. And then suddenly they're against a team that is like probably should go through, but they're not quite as strong as the super high seeded teams or the teams that are the best in the field. And then they get knocked out, and then all of a sudden a weaker team might make it like slip through the cracks. So it's a system where that can happen. Obviously, the advancement and elimination maps are best of 3. That's to serve as a control to try to mitigate that factor, but it can always happen, as we've seen at many majors past. Either way, that about does it for me on this one. So I hope you enjoyed it, and remember to check out my stream where over the course of the major, I'll be picking up demos from various teams that I think are interesting. I'm really looking forward to seeing MIBR. Obviously, they won't be in the first stage, but there's not too much known about them just yet because they didn't play in any of the tournaments early this year. But you can check out my stream, twitch.tv/ddktv, where I will be playing Counter-Strike, talking about Counter-Strike. You can ask me any questions you want. I'll also be playing Apex Legends as well. That's a lot of fun as my sort of secondary game. And also... as far as the demos go for this first stage, I will have to keep my eye on it. But I think that there's a depending on how the matches turn out, I'm really interested to look at Cloud9, Team Vitality, Fnatic and NiP, I don't necessarily see it happening unless there's a really outstanding game. Same thing for NRG, just because they've all been around the block a few times at this point. But some of the newer teams, they're interesting to see how they play together as players, as you know, in matchups, their approach to maps. That's very interesting stuff. So we'll be looking at that as well as the week progresses. So yeah, check it out. And if you like the podcast, you can share it. And of course, I have a Patreon as well if you want to support it. And yeah, it's been great. I'm glad you guys enjoy it, and I'll see you for the next one.